Channel 79, we're ready to start. Kate, am I supposed to call this actually to order?
It's not, no, it's just a workshop, so you don't have to.
I want to welcome our town administrator, Kate Bush, to give us a 2022-2023 proposed budget update.
Okay. Before we get into the budget, I want to give you a quick lesson in fund accounting for those of you who are not familiar with it. You have the general fund, which is your primary operating fund. There is only one general fund. And here it's made up of the town side and the Board of Ed, which is one line item in the town's budget. Then you can have special revenue funds. They're usually operating funds. You can have lots of special revenue funds. They must be primarily supporting, self-supporting with little or no reliance on a contribution from the general fund. That's what distinguishes them. When they're budgeted annually. You can have special revenue funds that are not budgeted. Then we have capital funds. You can have a lot of capital funds. They can rely on other funds for resources. They may be budgeted annually, but typically the appropriations don't lapse at year end. Okay. One thing I want to tell you about the general fund, we're going to be mostly looking at the expense side, but there is a revenue side. When you think about the revenues for the general fund, departments are not profit centers. So I've used the analogy of putting bunches of hoses into a pool, but I also thought of this one. If you had a coin jug when you were growing up, where everybody would dump their loose change into the jug, that's kind of what the general fund is like. All the departments dump their revenues into the jug. When it comes out, it doesn't matter who it started with. It all comes out of that, that one place. So they're not profit centers. They don't get to, they can take credit for their, what they raise, but they don't get exclusive use of it. And just because they've raised more money this year doesn't mean they get to spend more money this year. So the funds that we budget annually are the general fund, the sewer operations fund, the parking operations fund, the capital fund, which we also call it's the reserve for capital non-recurring expenditure fund. Then there's a sewer capital fund, a parking capital fund, and there is a sewer assessment fund, which is our little oddball where people who have had sewer expansion projects in their neighborhood that have to pay for the cost of those expansions, their assessment payments go into that sewer assessment fund. It then reimburses the general fund for the debt service. So our budget timeline this year, department heads had to submit their request to me by the 15th of December. I'm now presenting the budget to you. We'll be working on it for the next couple of weeks. You're scheduled to vote on it on February 7th at your regular meeting. You must present it to the Board of Finance on the first Tuesday in March, which is March 1st. The Board of Finance then has to hold a public hearing on the second Tuesday in March, which is the 8th. They're scheduled right now to vote on the budget on April 5th. They do have a deadline, I think it's the third Tuesday is their deadline for setting the mill rate. But they try and schedule around school break usually. And then the RTM vote is at the annual budget meeting. And just so you know, you can increase budget requests. The Board of Finance can increase, the RTM cannot. When it gets to them, all they can do is decrease what's been sent to them. So the process we're going to follow this year, we no longer print budget books at this level. You've been provided access to the budget software at OpenGov so that you can review the proposals online. And if some of you are having trouble getting in, give Jen Charneski an email or a call tomorrow and she'll help you out. I am going to also send out a little video demo that I did to show you how you move around a little bit. During the budget process, as each department is reviewed, I'll be sharing their proposal on screen. And we also have backup information that we can put up on screen too. There's commentary, there's spreadsheets to show how they calculated salaries, there's performance measures, there's a number of pieces of additional information that we can show you. So this is just to show you what the fund level looks like in OpenGov. This is an old screenshot of the sewer fund. And you see at the top, you get some, oh, I can't, I need a laser pointer. You get some graphics for the whole fund. And then you get the different breakdowns of the segments. In the general fund, there's a lot. Sewer fund only has a couple. Then this is what the proposal screen would look like, the first one. It's got some information, just some narrative, and you can see that there's a file attached that has commentary. And then this one is hard to see, but that's what the, that's all the lines in one org, one of the detail screens. And it goes even further, like we can break each of those lines down into all the details. So you'd be able to see every single thing that a department put in to build their budget. So as I said before, I'm going to share my screen during the meeting so that you and the other attendees can see the departments and accounts under discussion. After all of you have had a chance to ask questions, First Selectmen will invite other elected officials to ask questions. And because we're doing it virtually, we're going to ask them to submit their questions via the chat function. So some of the things I say every year. This is more than a budget. It's a plan for the services that we're going to provide and how we're going to provide them. I think it's very important that you as the Board of Selectmen be vocal about your priorities and your reasoning in the budget decision, what your reasoning was in making your budget decisions, so that you impact what the Board of Finance decides. The plan is to meet your goals and objectives. It's a plan to respond to the growth that we're experiencing, and it recognizes that the growth is not without cost. I almost put on the front page, instead of just saying it was the operating budget, giving it a theme of growing pains. And it's a plan to respond to taxpayers' needs. So these are not just monetary decisions, they're policy decisions. And I think there are a couple different approaches you can take to crafting the budget. My preference is the first one. Look at what you need to carry out your goals, and then determine if you can afford them all, and you might need to go back and cut some more. Or you can decide, here's what we can afford to fund, and start with the cutting from that direction. But I prefer you look at, this is what you want to accomplish. These are the services you want to provide, the goals you want to carry out, and craft the budget that will do that. You may have to decide between competing priorities, and some of the performance measures that we provide may be able to help you determine which ones to choose. Where will the funding have more impact? So other things to think about: can we improve and expand the services we provide? Can we provide the services more efficiently? Can we provide them in a manner that is more convenient for the taxpayer? What's the impact of development on the budget, both the revenue and expense side? Can we improve, expand, become more efficient, increase convenience, and minimize the impact on the mill rate? So we'll start with the general fund. Some increases are to fund new programs or to continue with the implementation of programs begun in prior years. The proposal does include an increase in FTEs. There's an accounting change that's been made, moving Parks and Rec programs from revenues and expenses to a special revenue fund. And I'm pointing that out because it can skew the percentages of increases in the budget. So overall, if we take that out, if we take out debt service, if we take out the transfer to capital, what I'm proposing is about a 3.7% increase. So 51% of the general fund budget is just general town operations. Of that 51%, public safety is almost half of it, and public works is about 18%. Debt service makes up 20% of the town's, the Board of Selectmen side of the budget. And that is almost 60% Board of Education debt service, about 38% town debt service, and then a small portion for sewer debt service. Yes.
Are all of your proposed capital contributions or all your proposed capital projects, are all those expensed, or are you proposing the amount of those being bonded?
I am proposing that some of them be bonded,
Okay.
okay? And
And they're not included in your.
they are not included in that, no. And that's a first. I have not done that before.
I was going to request you start doing that, because we have not done that in the past.
Yeah. So here's a year over year, and you can see, last year I had percentages in the far right, and I took them off because it's really skewed. You know, town operations not up much, the other benefits, these are not up much, but then you look at the capital contribution. Last year, the Board of Finance chose to not transfer anything from the general fund to the reserve fund for capital. They used some fund balance in capital to offset that budget. So that's a huge change. And it totally would skew the numbers. So looking at some individual things, the police department, like I said, is 45% of town operations. And this is where our first FTE is added. The chief has been talking for a number of years that they were going to ask to add a civilian position to manage the information technology function. And the salary cost is estimated at about $100,000. This is our first full year of full 9-person civilian dispatch. So that's adding another cost of about $58,000 to that budget. If you recall, we originally budgeted for the last of the 9 dispatchers to come on in January of 2022. But we had some opportunities to hire a number all at once in the fall. So the Board of Finance allowed us, they gave us the funding to speed that up. So that's why the actual increase is not a little bit bigger right now. And the police are still, they're having to respond to the Police Accountability Act, so that's caused some increases in testing, training, equipment as a result of that. There are some offsets in the police department budget due to some retirements. We've been taking advantage of those as we go through doing the budget. There is one more coming. There's a civilian who has announced her retirement. So we haven't factored that into the budget at this point because we don't know, her retirement's not until July. We don't know how the replacement will shake out, you know, because if it's in the union, other union members have the right to apply for it. So, you know, you could have shuffling of positions and the real savings might be in another department's budget. Fire marshal, this is another area we've been talking about for a while that we were going to need to increase the staffing there. So what we have right now is 2 full-time fire marshals. One of them is actually half-time emergency management director. Then we have 4 part-time fire inspectors. We're proposing, what the ask was to move 2 of the part-time inspectors to full-time. What I'm proposing is to move 1 to full-time as of July 1st, move a second one to full-time as of January 1st of 23. The reasoning being, watching how the developments are taking shape, I don't think that the need will be there for 2 in July. But come January, we expect the need to be there. And I think that's something during your budget deliberations, we should look carefully at those numbers. The fire marshal has provided us with a lot of data on the number of inspections. And just if if we haven't touched on it in the past with you all, the increase in the multi-dwelling units is what's behind this. When you have multifamily housing, the fire marshal has to inspect every unit every year. So we've added a tremendous number, or will be adding a tremendous number of inspections to their workload with the, when these units become occupied. I would say that, you know, we've been looking at what the increased revenue will be from the redevelopments. They will more than cover the cost of the increased expenses, but this is where the growing pains come in. You know, it's great to have the redevelopment, but it will mean an impact on the expense side of our budget. Some other notable changes. Pension and OPEB contributions. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, so that means retiree medical. They are down a little bit in total. That's primarily due to reductions in the police OPEB costs. Contingency is up a little bit. We have an open union contract, that would be the police contract, and the town hall union contract, which we hope will be settled shortly. But we have funding in there to cover wage increases resulting from both of those contracts. I also added a little bit to the general contingency because I'm concerned about some of the areas where I've cut. The capital funding of $3.4 million. There was no transfer from the general fund last year, so that's a huge change in this budget. Parks and Rec has increased maintenance cost, and some of that is due to a move to organic materials at a couple of specific parks like Highland Farms and I think it's Cherry Lawn. And then Public Works, we're seeing an increase in motor fuel costs. The health department did ask for an additional full-time sanitarian. I didn't feel it was supported at this time, but as various parts of the redevelopment come online, this may be needed, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have some money in contingency if we need to increase our inspections due to different facilities coming online. Elections. So the cost of an election is expected to increase by about $20,000. This is a result of the state redistricting. The way that they have done this, in District 1, we will have to have 4 ballots. And that means 4 voting stations. And it means more people. And it means more printing costs and programming costs. The registrars are working with members of the RTM to consider redistricting the town to adapt more to what the state has done here and eliminate this, this issue. But I asked the registrars to budget for what we have. We can't assume that any changes will be made. And then again, as I referenced earlier, there's been an accounting change moving $500,000 from Parks and Rec to a special revenue fund. So what this is about is Parks and Rec they run a lot of programs, and the majority of those programs are self-supporting. So we've had a revenue line and an expenditure line that offset one another. But as we saw last year, they were just going gangbusters, and they were bringing in a lot more revenue than they budgeted, but it meant also a lot more expense than they had budgeted. And we actually had to go to the RTM to get an increase to both sides of the budget. So the finance director and I talked about it and felt that this is appropriate for a special revenue fund. That way they can operate with, if they have a great year, and $500,000 is not enough. They're hitting $1 million. We don't have to go back to the RTM because it's in a separate fund. It's on its own. It doesn't need a new appropriation. But like I said, excuse the expenditures because I would love to have sat here and taken credit for cutting $500,000 from the budget, but that's not exactly honest. And this one hurts. We've had our first significant increase in premiums in medical insurance for employees in several years, plus we had the increased headcount, so you're going to see a significant uptick there. The increase we're looking at is 8% in our premiums. But when you consider that the last couple of years we either had no increase or actually reduction, this is a little painful.
Comment briefly on how medical insurance is coordinated across the town. So the Board of Ed have separate medical insurance. Does
They
the
do.
library have separate medical insurance?
They do. Well, remember, the library, they're not our employees. They
No,
do.
it's okay, but
yeah.
but it's all separately managed and separate programs.
The library, you know, it's a little odd, right? They are on our dental plan, they are in our pension plan, but they're not town employees. They did participate in our medical plan, and they moved away from that, probably 10 years ago at least. But this is just town hall employees. And being a relatively small employer, we are a little bit more susceptible to ups and downs. We did once consider self-funding, but it doesn't work for us with the number of lives that we have. We would fluctuate too wildly. We're not reliable statistically.
How many employees are there total on that plan, do you know?
We have 150 approximately full-time employees.
How many insured lives?
Well, it's less than that.
Well,
When insured lives with
well,
dependents?
Employees plus all insured lives would be employees and dependents.
I don't know that number. We can get that. Let me write it down. I'm just trying to run out of paper in my little budget notepad.
Means you can't spend any more money.
Ran out of checks.
I still have my Board of Finance happy if you claim
Okay, capital. So, answering John's question before, the proposal does assume a portion of the funding will be provided through bonding. And just pointing out again that some of the funding was provided from the capital funds fund balance last year. I did focus on priority 1 projects and some of the lower cost priority 2 and 3. This year, for the first time, we scored the projects. There was considerations such as the return on investment, how many unfinished projects did the department currently have? Was there any change to operational costs? Did it align with Board of Selectmen goals and a number of other projects? And that was helpful in addition to departments saying what their priorities were, but looking at overall, how did these, which project should move forward. And I'm gonna say there's many worthy projects, many difficult decisions. And John got an email from me as the chairman of the ARPA committee last week saying, there's all these things that, these could be considered for ARPA projects. So I do think some of the projects that I'm proposing to you, maybe something that if we can convince the ARPA committee, we should remove them from this budget and fund them through the ARPA funds. And then there's some that I cut out, like the Fire Commission asked for $120,000 to create a classroom at the drill tower. It would be helpful to them in training. They could host training for other communities. But that was a big ask this year, especially since they had other improvements that were needed at the drill tower. So, I didn't fund that. But I think it's a worthwhile project, just maybe not this year. So some of the highlights, a lot of public safety and emergency response projects are funded. So the police department has asked for a drone. Emergency management director asked for a drone. And the building department asked for a drone. So the police department is where I've funded it. They have an officer who has taken the classes and he's FAA certified to operate a drone. They are willing to share the drone with other departments as needed. So I think with the one request, we can resolve all of our needs. Police department need to update their CCTV system. And there are some areas, I should say update and expand, because there are some areas of the property that are not covered. They need to update their general orders, and this relates to the Police Accountability Act, and that's something that we would like to hire an outside provider to do. In Public Works, we're looking at paving and sidewalk improvements at over $2 million. 1.2 for the paving, 750 was new sidewalks and 120 for rehab, I think. I might have the sidewalk reversed, I do, yeah, okay. Repairs to 701 Boston Post Road. If you're not aware, that little white house that sits in front of the Royal, that's the town's. That's where the paramedics are housed. It's an historic building. And the windows, the flashing, there's a number of things that need to be updated. And town hall facility improvements, we're still working on the gym, the windows, and things like that. Parks and Rec, the Weed Beach Walkway. That's a project that's estimated at a cost of $1.9 million. That's one of the things that I would propose, if we do it, be funded by bonding. May also be a nice use of ARPA money. You know, we all saw during COVID how many people were out walking for exercise, how many people were using the beaches. So it might be something that's good for that. And then just in general, we have vehicle replacement. Public Works will need a new vehicle for the new full-time fire marshal. And I've spent a lot of time with Ed and with Brian Transfort, who's our mechanic, talking about our fleet, trying to make sure that we're moving things in the right way, putting the vehicles where they're needed. The fire departments, they're always a big capital draw. They proposed replacing 2 engines and 1 rescue vehicle this year. So that's over $3 million.
Is their proposal consistent with your most updated long-term equipment replacement schedule? Did we know this, or is any of this?
No, yeah, this is known, yeah. If if you think back a few years ago, when I started saying to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance that we needed to rethink how we were funding the fire replacement, because there was a year coming when there was going to be a lot, and we just weren't going to have, at the rate we were going,
We're not going to have enough money.
we're not going to have enough money. Well, this was the year, so.
Well, we cleaned out the reserves.
We cleaned out the reserves, but, you know, I mean, that's a whole philosophical decision, and I have no arguments with it, but they're expensive, and, you know, bonding is the, to me, the best way at this point.
And this is all teed up for bonding, so part of the projects you've got there.
Yeah, so when you're looking at that $3 million number transfer from the general fund, that's not in it. The 1.9 for Weed Beach is not in it. It's a lot of other things. So they're also asking for things. There's some physical plant at the Heights Firehouse. They need to insulate the attic. They'd had to do some repairs and the insulation was removed. It needs to go back. They also need to do some joint and mortar repair. Again, these are things like the joint and mortar repair. They proposed to do 1 side a year for 4 years. We did ask them to get us a price for what it would cost to move that up, but we did not get a response on that. But it is something that might be a consideration for moving forward faster, maybe through ARPA money. Norotan asked for funding. It's only $12,000 to convert one of their spaces to a bunk room. And I thought this was a really great idea. They want to create a bunk room and workspace so that some of their members who are local during, you know, working locally could work at the firehouse and be able to respond to emergencies during the day. And then the bunk room so they could encourage people to be on call overnight. And I thought it was a great idea. And again, they're asking for drill tower improvements. They need to add another water source, and they would like to pave it. And then just general equipment replacement. You're gonna see through all of it, SCBA replacements, the self-contained breathing apparatus. Trying to think of, the radios. I think we're always replacing radios. But you'll see a lot of fire equipment replacement. There's gonna be jacks for rescue trucks and a lot of that kind of thing.
Kate, that big radio purchase that was on the horizon is no longer because of the change?
Yeah, they dropped it.
That's lovely.
That was the federal government.
Yeah, that was a big dollar amount, yeah.
Yeah, I think we benefited from the fact that New York, Los Angeles, some other big cities would have been subject to the same thing.
Yeah.
And, if you think our cost was gonna be several
no.
$million, what it would have meant to them,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
yeah. But these, when I'm talking about the radios, these are just the handhelds that,
Right.
have to be replaced every so many years. So the sewer fund, it funds the operations, the maintenance. The largest single expense in the sewer fund is fees paid to Stanford for treatment of the Darien sewage. It does also support capital projects. So the sewer operation fund, that's where your sewer use fees go in there. And there's the operations fund, but it also then funds capital projects, which are kept in a separate fund. This year, Ed is looking to do some collection system rehabilitation and to replace one of the sewer department's vehicles. The parking fund. This is a tough one. The revenues continue to be dramatically off from normal years. The revenue for fiscal '23 is anticipated to be insufficient to support normal staffing levels. In the fiscal '22 budget, we had eliminated one of the positions for 6 months. And if things continue as they are, well, basically this, things continuing as they are, we cannot support adding the second one back. So the proposed budget reflects one position being eliminated. And scales back the capital that Ed had proposed to do. We do still have the funding in there from last year to put the sidewalk in from the upper level on the south side down to the lower level, going down that little hill. But we were hoping to actually pave the lower level on the south side, and we just can't afford to do that right now, considering where this fund stands. We have done our best there. We have benefited from the fact that all the redevelopment activity was going on there, and the contractors have paid for monthly parking permits. So that has brought in about $30,000 in revenue that we might not have otherwise had. But and the stations are open.
Yeah.
But we are, right now, it's costing us a bit much in overtime to do that, because we open them up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is an hour before our crew normally starts. So we are looking into remote control locks so that we can open it and close it without human beings being involved. We used to have a concession operator who managed that, but we haven't been able to have one, and we, even though we were planning to reopen them, there's nobody that's interested in doing it, so.
Kate, on that, do we have enough camera coverage?
Yes. Yes, we do have significant camera coverage at both lots. So that's the big picture. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the total amount of the capital projects you are going to propose that we capitalize through bonding?
Through bonding, it's about 4.2 million.
Does that include the Weed Beach Walkway?
The Weed Beach Walkway and then the 3 fire trucks.
Okay.
It's significant.
Mhm.
And honestly, I would not have included the Weed Beach Walkway if I didn't think, it could be funded through bonding.
What's the total FTE increase? You mentioned that you were adding one, that you're losing one of the park rangers, you're adding. Would you summarize your FTE changes?
So adding one in the police department and adding, let's see, I guess I would call it at this point 0.75 in the fire marshal, because going from part-time to full-time adds a half, and the other one will be a full-time for half the year.
But we're losing the parking ranger.
We're losing a parking ranger, but the parking ranger is funded through the parking fund, so I
Isn't really-
consider them separate.
So 1 3/4.
Yes.
And your overall percentage increase was how much?
When I year to year, so taking out the park and rec change, the accounting change, and not accounting for, I feel I have no control over the debt service, so taking that out and taking the capital out, it's 3.7%.
Because the $4 million that you had on there looked like that was a higher percentage increase, but it's because of this accounting change that it's distorted, or?
The,
If you go
it's
back to
distorted.
If you go back to the slide where you had the last year, this year, and the difference.
Well, that's
First
distorted
one.
because of the capital.
The capital contribution.
There's $3 million in capital that we didn't
Yeah.
have last year, even though we funded approximately the same amount of,
Yeah, but that's my point, which is, what's the total operating budget increase? If you're including the capital that you are spending on your operating budget. That's closer to 10%, it looks like.
oh, it's good, yes, because that 4 million, or 3.3 million,
So unless we bond that, the town, including the capital expenditures, are being funded through the P&L, is closer to a 10% increase.
yeah, it's closer to a 10%. It's under 10.
It is under-
It is under 10,
You really? Yeah.
but it's just like, because somebody's board last year made a decision not to fund from the capital, I'm now paying the price.
Who could that have been? I don't know. It's about a 9% increase.
And it did feel important to be honest that, that I had that benefit of the $500,000 reduction in the Park and Rec department. I did not take credit for that. It would be nice to. So the other thing I think, I'll give you a more specific number tomorrow, Jen and I can do that, but when you're looking at the budget, you're gonna be looking at numbers around $80,000 or $90,000 to make any kind of significant change. You wanna move the needle on the mill rate, it's gonna, have to be in that size increments. Because our grand list is about $8 billion, so, a little $1,000 here, $2,000 here, those on their own won't do it. And, we are just looking right now at the expenditure side. A week from tonight, we should have the grand list. So, we can look at what kind of grand list growth there has been and how that all shakes out. So, what's happening on the expense side may not translate exactly to the same kind of increase on the revenue side.
You mentioned at the beginning that one of your budget points was thinking about delivering services in a way that was more efficient for
Mhm.
taxpayers, for
Mhm.
facilitating their payment for services.
Yep.
Are there any initiatives like that built in?
Yes, there are actually. The health department has asked for an upgrade to their software to enable them to accept credit cards and applications online. They've asked for a specific piece of software. We are also investigating what it would cost us to move them into the same software that building and planning and zoning are using. I have a proposal in there to update our website. Our website was last updated over 10 years ago. It's a little clunky, it's not as efficient as we would like, and I'm not sure that, it's as user-friendly for the residents. We think it's, things out there like, how do I get this stuff, how do I get a building permit, how do I get on the parking list, and people don't know where to find it. So we need something that is more convenient, more easy for the residents to use.
Have you made any changes to how you budgeted the library this year? I mean, historically, it's been a single grant that they ask for, and that's that. Is that process changed, or is it just remains a single sort of line item grant in your budget?
Yes, it's the same. What we did do this year in terms of grant is we asked for a lot more information from the people requesting grants. So you'll see that in OpenGov that I uploaded all their information. We asked about policies and, purchasing policies and their total budget and how much are we funding, what do they do with our money, and how many people from Darien did they serve. We asked for a lot of data. When Krista McNamara was on the Board of Selectmen, she and I worked on that to come up with the application form. So a lot more information. I think the thing that really needs to be addressed with the library is some of the policies. What happens if they have money left over at the end of the year from what we have funded? Looking to make sure that because we are their single largest contributor, making sure that some of their personnel policies align with ours.
What would be an example of that?
Well, we a few years back, we learned that they had a much more generous payout for employees when they retired in terms of vacation benefits.
But we fixed all that.
We fixed that, yeah. There have been times when their wage increases, they were proposing wage increases that were significantly higher than what our employees were receiving. And they had the reasons for it. But it's, when we're funding it, it's part of our pension, it's important that the town have some input, I think.
Are there anything those are things that are in the past that you've cured, or the things that are existent?
Well, there's probably some things around employee benefits. What percentage of premiums do their employees pay? What, kind of life insurance do they offer? They're on our dental. Those are the kind of things that I can think of right now. So I think we've come a long way. I think Kira Parrott, the current library director, has been tremendously open with listening to things that we have suggested. I think they've moved in the right direction where their wage increases now have a merit component, not just a straight up cost of living. So I think they've really done a lot in response to the things that we've raised with them in the past.
One of the things we talked about with the library is having some kind of regular communication patterns, meeting, quarterly or biannually. Has that been happening in the library? Kira seems to be a very...
I wouldn't say that it's regular, like it's not scheduled, but
it's happening.
It happens, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. The next question I have is, when will these budgets be released for us to be able to view?
In the morning.
Okay.
Just one other question on the health insurance. Can you give us just a headline of how much it's increasing? How much did that compare to last year?
The library?
Health insurance.
So last year we had no increase, no premium. The town's premium did not increase last year. The year before it had decreased. So it's going up 8% this year.
And how does that 8% compare to what you're hearing from the town or the library and from the Board of Ed for their health insurance?
The Board of Ed's was much higher. They were having issues. The library, I'm not sure. The library's on the state partnership plan, which is a completely different kind of plan. So I'm not sure. I think that we will have that information. when they present their budget.
But Kate, isn't that also just a function of what's happening with employees specifically?
It's a function of our claim experience.
Right.
We had a bad year. There's also somewhat of a COVID factor in there, though our consultant worked very hard to take that out. And what insurance companies were doing was making an assumption that rates should go up because people had not sought care during the first year of the pandemic. So that they would be delaying care, so now all of a sudden you're gonna have a wave of things needing to happen. And what our consultants were able to show is that that wasn't the case in Darien. That people continued to seek the regular care. So the numbers that they saw were not, they were not short in the expenditures, they were actual. So they shouldn't add an inflationary factor to it. But we just, unfortunately, we had some significant bad claims.
I'm sure the population's aging too, that also impacts it, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, me too. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, it's interesting, our population's aging, but one of the things that kind of happens here is in the town side, and not the police, but on just the town, people tend to stay long past the normal retirement age. So you get that hit on the medical expenditures, right? But then it benefits us on the pension side.
Is it a wash?
No.
Fortunately, the Board of Selectmen is ageless, so.
I like to think that.
So tomorrow night, we'll start going through the lineup we have for tomorrow night. Was on the schedule I sent you all. Our intent is to knock off a lot of the small departments, go through general government, which all tend to be pretty small. We'll go through community environment, some of the social service, human service areas, get all the smaller budgets out of the way. Wednesday night.
That's a big night.
Pardon?
Wednesday night's a big night.
Well, Wednesday night's gonna change a little bit, so, neither the chief nor Ed Gentile are available on Wednesday night. So we've pushed them off to Monday the 31st. So on Wednesday, we will still cover Parks and Rec, the library. We'll move the employee benefits and risk management up, and we'll move some of the fire expenses up. And then Monday the 31st, that'll be those two budgets, taking the police and public works, those are two big budgets.
Can you confirm the arrangements for your email today? It said these meetings are virtual for.
They're gonna be virtual.
Okay.
I sent you all the Zoom link. So I'll be sharing my screen. And what we're going to do is, in Zoom, make all of you co-hosts so that you can unmute and speak easily. We will keep everybody else muted. We are going to ask the other elected officials if they have questions. They are to use the chat function and send their questions to Jen Charneski. So as we go through a department, say, we're talking about the assessor's budget, Monica will ask you all if you have any questions. And then once we've answered your questions, Jen will let us know if there are any questions from other elected officials. Then we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you. This is very helpful.
Looking
And I
forward
do-
to tomorrow morning.
Pardon?
Looking forward to tomorrow morning.
Is it like 3, 2, 1, and then?
That's in Jen's control. And the one thing I will say, as we go into tomorrow, ask questions. And, if you don't think of it, at the meeting, you want to send me something beforehand, you want to send me something the next day, please ask questions because it's how you learn, And I, will say, I've been doing budgets here for now 20 2+ years. So there's some that I know, and, you know, and I'm just gonna gloss over it, because it's small, and it, you know, I think, oh, that's, you know.
Don't block.
But, if you have a question on it, stop me. You know, just because I've passed it over doesn't mean that you need to, you know. So we'll gloss over the town administrator's budget, but everything else.
So
Okay.
I mean, this is just nuts and bolts, so I'm on OpenGov right now, so when I open this tomorrow and I hit budget, it's going to be there.
You should see 23, not 22.
Right.
Yeah, you should be able to see 23, not 22.
Okay. All right.
And I'll also send you the link to the little video that shows you how to click on and, you know, drill down and get all the detail. And, you know, department heads are pretty good about putting in, you know, there'll be some accounts where the detail's a little sparse, but, you know, I encourage you, like, go look at the police salary budget line. The patrol, you're gonna see every officer. If you go look at the medical insurance line, you're gonna see how we built that. I mean, it's a big budget, so you're gonna see all that information on how we built it. You know, we're not just throwing 3% on last year's number. We're building from scratch.
So we will be spending a lot of time together this week.
Virtually.
First,
Well, don't forget that Thursday,
Right.
we will be meeting in
Yep.
person,
Okay.
except for John,
Isn't that-
okay? So we are very excited to seat the building committee. So we will be interviewing people on Thursday, and then again, the following week,
terrific.
I think on the 3rd. So we have a number of interested candidates, and I don't know who we're interviewing
No,
on
I'm
Thursday.
thrilled.
I
No,
forgot.
she did reply.
She did,
With
great.
names Linda did, yeah, I'm thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. Thank you. We'll look forward to
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks a lot.
seeing you
I'm gonna go
tomorrow.
to my night job now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have to go.
Thanks,
Log in for the
everyone.
RTM. Thanks, everyone.
Ooh, wow.